What is Google Stitch and what can you do with it? Which problems does it solve and does it replace your current UI design tools? In this video I will answer all of these questions. There was a lot of noise about Stitch, so I felt I needed to try it and see what it's about, and even see if it replaces something in the design process. So we will start by looking at the hands-on test I made, and then we will move on to answer the questions. When you open Stitch, you get this prompt window. You can choose between doing a website or an app design. I tried both, but I started with a website. And in this prompt window, you can also choose to upload references. You can start from a pre-existing theme, one of their templates, or you can create your own design system, or more or less like a theme for your website. And then you can choose between different Gemini models. And instead of writing, you have this feature that you can live chat with Gemini. And this is a quite cool feature that you can talk to Gemini while it's building. If you choose to create your own theme, you're more or less choosing a color palette, a font setup, and the corner radius. And you can also choose to create an MD file if you want to describe your style. So just to make a first test of what Stitch could generate, I created a super basic prompt. Basically, create me a website for a design portfolio. And then I used one of the pre-selected themes, the Bauhaus one. And I got a website design with multiple menus. And in these menus, there were text and there were some generated images. So what you could do here was to double click on any of the screens, and then you go into a sort of edit mode. And what you could do is to edit the text or basically replace images, but you cannot move things around like in Figma. So it's quite limited what you can do in edit mode. It wanted you to change the screens or update the screens with the Gemini AI. And then you can choose to talk to Gemini or write to Gemini as you prefer. And if you want to replace the images, you have two options. Either you generate something with AI, or you can replace it with an image if you have the URL to that image. But what if you have an image in your canvas in Stitch and you want to put that one inside? You can't really pull an image and put it there or copy paste it into the screen. So what you can do is to rename that image, and then you tell Gemini to replace one image with the image based on that reference name. So that is the way you basically change an image to another image you have in your Stitch canvas. To be honest, it feels a little bit like you're not having edit rights in Figma, but you're telling another designer to do the changes. So now we have confirmed that Stitch can generate a basic generic website according to a default theme it has. So what we need to know now is if Stitch can design something specific according to what style you have in mind. So what I did was to take some style explorations I've made in Figma. It was just a color palette, fonts, it was a style of a layout. So I throw those in as images into Stitch, and I asked Stitch to create a website for a design company selling design services based on these reference screens. And I told it to copy the layout style, the fonts, and the color palette. Stitch seemed to understand that I wanted a dark website with white text and red accent color, but the layout was quite generic. The colors didn't follow my color palette that well. And yeah, it wasn't really like my reference images. And I later tried using other reference images with the same style and generating an app design. And even the app design got the same color palette as this website design. So it seems like Stitch is defaulting to a color setup that is based on this red accent color. However, I managed to ask Gemini to update my screen and make the background darker and add some red glows. And it kind of manages to improve the design and make it more similar to my references. But it didn't really seem to understand my reference style and be able to replicate it. Instead of using the color palette as a color palette, it used them as images to put as placeholder images in the image area. I can confirm that Stitch can kind of understand which color palette we're working with. So it understood that I have a dark background, white text, and red accent color, but it didn't extrapolate my style reference. So I went on to see if it could create some interactions. So I asked it to create hover states on my images, and I asked it to make the buttons with a hover state and a pressed state. And that worked on first try, no problems. So basically I had a prototype where I could try a hover state and button clicks. So since Stitch didn't seem to be able to reproduce my brand style based on reference images, I wouldn't use Stitch for aesthetic explorations. So if you already have a style or a brand defined somewhere else than in Stitch, I would rather manually input the brand style into the design system feature and then use that style to create new websites or new apps. So I would say it's a waste of time to use this tool to polish aesthetics, but it's really quick to generate a structure of an idea that you have in your head and just get the overall picture. So in the first stage of your design process, you can take your idea to something that you can actually discuss and evaluate and communicate with your colleagues and teammates. And even people that have no design skills whatsoever can be involved in the design process in the early phases. It's also really convenient that you can talk to Gemini live and ask it to build things. And this is really good for the bold strokes. So how far can I take my design with Stitch? I would say that you can create the overall information architecture, overall layouts, and you can have more or less the type of vibe that you intend. But I would not do any kind of design details or polishing, but I would rather convert it into something where I can continue working on the details. So how can you continue working on your design that you have started off in Stitch? There are a bunch of export options, and if you just read the list here, you have AI Studio, you have Figma, and you have a bunch of other options. However, it's not tightly integrated with the Google AI Studio. So you will send like references over to AI Studio, and then you will still have to prompt the design from scratch over there based on the references. Then you also have a Figma export. And I tried this feature and it works decent. You can transfer your screens over to Figma. And what you're doing is basically copying your screens in a Figma format to your clipboard, and then you can paste it into Figma. Often it works, but once in a while the screens come a little bit broken, or sometimes it even comes over as PNGs. The way I would go about using Stitch is to just create a basic reference there. A basic information architecture, basic layouts, but no polishing whatsoever. I would not change the spacing, change the images, modify texts, modify layouts on detail level. And then I would quickly send it to Figma or to Claude Code and start working on it properly. When you export your Stitch project as a zip file, what is in that zip file is PNGs and an MD file. And those you can use, for example, in Claude to describe what kind of design you want. Stitch also has some other cool features. You can generate a project brief or a description of your project based on the screens. You can copy the HTML code. You can preview your screens on different screen sizes, for example, a desktop screen and a mobile view. So now when you have a feeling of what Stitch is like, I can answer the questions. So what is Google Stitch and what can you do with it? I would say it's a tool to generate your initial concept idea and get a big structure that you can communicate within your team. And everyone can participate, even the ones that are not designers can come and present their thoughts and their ideas. And then you can take that idea, the basic structure, into a professional design tool and work on the details. Stitch also has a bunch of smart features, but I would say that the main reason for using it is that you and your team can agree upon the direction of the project and the bold strokes. And even the people who are not professional designers can participate and communicate their thoughts visually. It helps you to take your first step. It takes you from a blank canvas into an overall direction that you can take over to a professional design tool and execute. Just because you can generate a website in seconds doesn't make you a good designer. And it doesn't guarantee that you have a good website design either. But it gives you a tool to visually communicate your ideas. So no matter if you're a designer or not, next time you have a good idea in mind, you can open Google Stitch and you can generate this idea in minutes and communicate with your colleagues about it. This is equal to someone who is not a good artist, but can still generate really cool images using an image generation tool. So to summarize this topic, I would say that good design requires proper UX/UI design skills. It also requires tools where you can properly implement and polish your design. But it also requires this initial phase where everybody in the team can communicate on the design visually and take the big directions to the bold strokes. And that is where I believe Google Stitch will fit in.